Hello everyone, I'm Sveinn. Nice to see you all here, and I'm going to talk about a little personal project I made over a weekend in April this year. Okay, so there are all kinds of data publicly out there, often scattered around in many places, perhaps in separate, unnecessarily many formats as well, just lying around, waiting for someone to come around and gather it. A Friday evening in April, I was facing a problem. I realized that I had no solid overview over gas station locations in my vicinity. Mostly I just knew the locations of those stations I had used before or happened to know about. I was aware of some existing price comparison sites, for example gsmbenzin.is, which exposed names, addresses, but that wasn't really helping me to get a feel of nearby station locations. I felt this information needed to be available somewhere in one place. It wasn't. So I decided to change that. So, the task. I needed to gather two things. One, locations of petrol stations, preferably in the form of geo-coordinates, which would be easy to add on a map of some kind. And two, petrol prices mappable to each station. I started by going through the Icelandic oil companies, checking their websites and what information they were exposing. All of them exposed a list of their operating stations, their addresses, and either global or individual petrol price for each of its gas stations. Following, it was a rather easy task to extract a list of stations with geo-coordinates included for most companies using plain scripts. But for some companies, the exact coordinates weren't exposed, and I had to resort to some hideous manual labor to check semi-precise coordinates for each station. Following this, I gave it some thought if I could possibly make some automatic new stations detection. But because the new stations are not frequently built, and even if I would make some automatic detector for this, it would most likely break more often than new stations are built. So I ended up just using hard-coded list of the stations that I had gathered and acknowledged the fact that I would need to manually add new stations as they would be built. Writing gas price scraper for each company website and map the prices to every station turned out to be remarkably simple as well. There were some things needed to keep in mind though. Some companies provide separate list prices and discount prices, where list price is the amount you pay if you don't have any company card, gas key, or any discount contract, and discount prices if you do. I had actually seen this being messed up on like gsmbenzin.is, where they were showing list prices for some, but discount prices for others, and that was terrible. Sorry. It's been really trending for Icelandic oil companies for many years now to play these discount games. Yet some have started to seize this game with subsidiary companies, for example Skeljungur with Orkan X and now N8 with Dylan. After getting all the gas station locations and making scrapers to fetch prices, I made a list of objects such as this one. A list of 253 objects like this for every station in Iceland. Great success. Yet, at this point, I felt there was some missing potential here. Sure, knowing current prices was pretty good, but as looking up the current price data had proved to be this easy to do, why not also log gas price changes over time? This would require some gas price logging system. Or would it? I realized that I could simply use Git to monitor the gas price changes. Git is a version control system for text files after all. And all the data and scripts I was using were just that, a bunch of text files. I'd like to mention though that using Git to monitor changes may not be ideal approach for every dataset out there. I'd say it heavily depends on the size of the data set and how frequent it is modified. But for this case, using Git to log price changes sounded like an excellent idea. A human-readable JSON file with all the gas stations, location, and gas prices was just over 3,000 lines. Assuming gas price changes would occur maybe once or twice per week for each company, I safely assumed Git would handle this task without immediately growing out of hand. Another reason to use Git for this, it made it straightforward to share the data with others. I would only need to set up a public Github repository, for example. And with that, anyone interested in the data could simply clone it or access the current master for current price data. I was a bit worried though, that if this project would catch on by any chance, which it maybe hasn't at this point, and requests to the repository would increase dramatically, Github might not like that they were being used as an endpoint of some kind for data. So, I attempted to ease those worries by creating a pull request on apis.is, which added an endpoint to my GitHub endpoint. The cache time on apis.is is configurable. I simply set it to 15 minutes, as the price lookups are run via cron job now every 15 minutes, which auto-commits price changes to the repository if there are any. This way, the repository would at most get a single hit every 15 minutes or so. Yeah, or so. Apis.is is a wonderful tool which I believe many of you here have heard about and even used for personal, school, or work-related project. If anyone here has not heard about it, check it out, it's awesome. It has many, many, many nice things that you can look at regarding fetching information with JavaScript and throwing it forward. I must admit though that my project actually didn't use JavaScript, it was written in Python. But that was simply because I had more experience of scraping things in Python than JavaScript at the time. So, here is the setup of what I've started to call GasApplet. It consists of a single Raspberry Pi with the sole purpose of checking for price changes every 15 minutes, and in case there are any, auto-push them to the public Git repository where anyone interested in price changes over time can access that. For those interested in only the current gas prices, the apis.is endpoint exposes just that with minimal effect to the GitHub repo itself. In addition to this, my faithful red Raspberry Pi notifies me on my personal Slack channel, both when new prices appear and when the scraper fails to run. Well, this is a scraper after all, it's bound to break every now and then. Poor thing. Now, I made some point or conclusions following this project. One point is inexpensive. Data collection setup like this can be set up and kept running with little to no cost, other than occasional spending time on maintaining scrapers when something breaks and keeping a Raspberry Pi or something else plugged in somewhere. potential value, I believe projects like this could hold great value. Perhaps even more so when the results are exposed in this manner, where anyone can dig into the data for themselves. Git is good, and we could use it a lot more, I think, for many other things than version control for programming projects. Just imagine, for example, if our respectful Alþingi would start version controlling our constitutions and other regulations in an Icelandic public Git repository. I'd like to think it would be amazing. And last, not least, time series data sets can be interesting. In cases where data changes frequently changes over time, it is often interesting to log most of all modifications with a timestamp and to create a time series dataset. Time series datasets are interesting to view and analyze. Often it is more interesting to see how the data has changed over a time frame than looking at the most recent data. Thank you for the time. Here are some fancy graphs and maps. Woo! Questions, Rosalind?
You mentioned that you had to manually input the locations of the gas stations.
Yeah.
Did you consider cross-referencing the address with Google Maps or something?
At the time, yeah, the question was I resorted to manual labor for getting some geo-coordinates for some stations. Damn you, Olis. And he asked if I had thought of cross-referencing addresses in Google Maps or something to like get a geo-coordinate. At that time, no, I didn't think of that. But if I would, then I might have like checked it just to be sure, regardless. But yeah, that was something I should have done at that time. But as the stations weren't that many, I resorted to manual labor because, yeah, it is what it is.
How did you do the scraping? Did you use a helper library like Google Soup, or did you just DOM-walk or do regexes?
So the question is, what libraries did I use to scrape things? I'm using Python, and I mostly used just the module called requests, and then a library called XML, which parses XML and HTML. And all this code is available publicly on Github if anyone's interested. It's over here, github.com/gasvaktin/gasvaktin.